Well, this is SPED 471 in secondary classroom management. I just want to tell you a few things about it. It's been said that the biggest reasons people lose their jobs in teaching, or I shouldn't say lose them, quit their jobs or let go from their jobs or just turn away from teaching is classroom management. One of the things that we'll find in the lesson is that an important part of classroom management is good sound teaching. And so can I assume that you've had good training and that you will put on sound lessons? It seemed like when I was teaching that the teachers had the most difficulty with classroom management weren't always the most sound teachers. But there's a couple things to keep in mind, and one big one that I want to tell you that plays a role, and that is the most important part is still relationships. Your relationship with the students. They won't care how much you know until they know how much you care. If they perceive that you don't care about them or you don't like them, the gig's up. And sometimes you're going to find that some of the students are a little bit hard to like. Now, the ones that are like you and think like you and are easy, you're going to gravitate to, and that's easy. But what about those kids that are hard? The second thing is that the challenging students often will have learning needs. Remember the bell-shaped curve, about half of your class is below average, half of your class above average. And for the most part, teachers have always functioned in the upper half of the class. And so we don't really relate well to that lower half, and yet most of your classroom management problems are going to come from those struggling students. And third, be prepared. Have a good solid plan of how you're going to react to things so you don't have to make those decisions on the fly. Sometimes when we go to do student teaching, that's not a good model because that person has the students trained and has the plan and implements it without a lot of, it becomes pretty opaque that you can't see it. But when you get out and get your first classroom, get your first contract, you're going to have thought through these things, and that's what I want to walk you through in this course, is how to make that plan. So those three things, relationships, lower doing students, and a plan is kind of what this will be built on. Let's take a look. Well, here's some information for the course, and the first thing you'll want to do is go on the course page and pull down notes 1 and 2. The first one will be the bulk of it. This will be later. You'll need this notes 1 first and then notes 2, but you can download them both and have them on your desktop, print them, whatever. And I'll try and work it so that you can just work them right on your desktop, but however you're comfortable. And if you haven't done this, why don't you stop this video now and download those sets of notes for yourself. Okay, you're back, and let's get started here with classroom management and discipline. This you've heard before, and I guess I've always thought these go together, but good teaching helps prevent management problems, and sound management provides a context within which good teaching can occur. And so good teachers that have good sound instruction rarely have management problems, but part of that is because they have sound management in addition to the good teaching. And not too often do you see somebody that has one or the other, one but not the other. And so you'll want to be in tune with good teaching as well as sound management. Okay. The days you're going to have trouble are the days where you're not well planned, and especially when you start out as a new teacher. Not uncommon at all to see you struggle that way. And when I see student teachers, when I see them struggle the most is when they're not prepared well enough. And so you want to have your lessons always prepared so that doesn't become your problem. Yes, you have the responsibility to establish both, and that when we sign you to a contract, when the administrator or principal assigns you to a contract, they have a responsibility to see that there's learning in their school, and part of that, they make the assumption that we have given you a degree, and that degree in teaching says that you understand teaching and classroom management. So you're responsible for both. And the two areas that you concentrate on, first of all, obviously problem prevention through good management, and then procedures useful as a response to inappropriate behavior. So two things. What am I going to do to prevent? What am I going to do to when there is inappropriate behaviors? Two parts. First of all, the dimensions of classroom management. First, the most important component is prevention. is doing things that prevent. Classrooms are complex environments that greatly vary. Students have all different abilities. I think of my little ones, how I see that in small classes, but from low to high, and so all in between. Remember with the bell-shaped curve, that here's the average at 100, and half your class is on one side, the other half's on the other side. And so they bring all those different disabilities and all those different backgrounds. You'll have kids in your class that don't like school. Okay, some that love school, some that come from backgrounds of people that aren't educated, some that'll have college, parents will have college educations. All that comes into play in their desire to learn. And then their interests, of course, can range from one end to the other to the spectrum. And it involves you a little bit. And, of course, especially like middle school, maturity is a big difference from kids that are very responsible for their learning and responsible for their self to kids that aren't responsible at all. And then, of course, there's motivation. How motivated are they to learn? It has to do sometimes with their past history also. And this is interesting, these large blocks of time. In no other place, think about this with me, no other place will they spend this large amount of time in very close proximity where they don't want to be or necessarily want to be. The only other place that even comes close, this is hard to say, is prison. Every other place they'll go in their life, they can walk away anytime they want. If they have a job that they don't like, they can walk away if it's too close. If they have a car they don't like or family, heck, they can divorce their spouses. But school, it's hard to get away. So we put them in large blocks of times in real close proximity, and you're going to have some issues. And this makes that setting really unpredictable. And here's your responsibility. The appropriate materials, capture their interests, organize the space, use instructional time, and leave them feeling positive about their time there with you. Not much, is it? But you think of it that way, that I'm going to organize these areas and ultimately that we have a positive impact, that they learn. And of course the thing that's changed is now we measure learning with standardized tests. We used to measure teaching. We used to worry about teaching, but one thing that's changed. We're not going to focus on teaching in our schools near as much as we do on learning, and now we feel like we have something that can measure the learning. And they've identified 30 different categories of psychological motivators. We bring it all together and make a plan on how to motivate these kids. Well, what about space management? You need to consider that attractiveness in the space, how much crowding, the comfort level of the learners, arrangements. And sometimes you don't get to say, in space management and arrangements and stuff, but for example, air conditioning or not air conditioning, do you have your control the heat? Can you make more heat or less heat? Can you open windows? Have something to do with that. And sometimes you have a say in this, sometimes you don't with crowding. You may have 20, you may have 30, you may have 10. My first grader right now is in a class of 9. Down the street in another school, there's 30 in 25 in the classrooms in first grade. So you may or may not have control of that, but you have some responsibility to deal with it. But you can arrange materials and desks. And all I can say is have a reason. If you're arranging your desks and materials different than they are when you get there, have a reason. One reason is not because that's the way they did it in the past. When that classroom is set up, where can you have the desk? You can choose that. You can't always move where the window is, where the door is, of course, but you can decide if the desks are going to go one way or the other. They can face the opposite way, maybe face away from the door. You get to make those decisions, but have reasons why you've done them. And you need to have a plan. How about wall space? And wall space is very interesting because, again, really do you get to have say on some of the things, like for example the bulletin board. It's a huge deal if you want to move where a bulletin board is. You can't move a window. If here's your classroom and here's the window and here's the door, you don't change those. But if there's a bulletin board here and you'd like to make a teaching area, you can have that moved. but it takes some work and it takes some time to do that. You also can affect the colors and stuff. You can ask for painting. Maybe you paint your classroom to get a softer pastel color. You can affect that also, because sometimes wall-based will affect the environment. Motivation displays can be stimulating to them. You may want to display some work that's being done. You certainly may want to put up with schedules or announcements, a place for that. One of the things we commonly talk about is that you have the classroom rules up. And again, like I said, color, but you may have to play a role at it if you don't like the color. But often they're white. They've always been white, and nobody challenges that. And if it's really hard if you don't get your own classroom, and I worked with a number of teachers that were what we called mobile teachers, is that they move from classroom to classroom. But if you have your own classroom and you can have a say, that's one of the things you can do, this what we call tone it down, softer pastel colors. And the other thing I say about walls is occasionally change them. That we put it up at the beginning of the year, and year after year it's the same. And the other thing I see mostly in elementary classrooms is the clutter on the wall, that we have put up every single thing that we've ever gotten that was free. All the numbers, all the letters, all the punctuation marks, the word wall, everything in the walls are just solid, full of stuff. And sometimes, especially if you have a little attention deficit, it can be a little overwhelming. So you may want to avoid clutter in your walls. And then there's floor space. Okay. You know, how dense is it? And you want them to be able to, so they're not crowded, but they can observe and hear the teacher and see the board and those types of things. And unless you've got an obstruction in the class, a pole or something, that's usually easy to do. But sometimes you stagger the space or that type of thing so that they can see. I've seen some nice horseshoe arrangements where the teacher's teaching spaces is here and students sit around this way. It depends on the size, but I was in a third grade class that worked great. I see many high school rooms this way. Some people have rows going this way with the teacher here. The traditional way, of course, is rows going this way with the teacher in front. Or you may want to stagger them like this a little bit with the teacher in front, and hopefully they'll see better. But you arrange. And you got to have it so there's room for big groups, small groups, or individual work. And I also have to work the teacher to move quickly for instruction. The Fred Jones model like this, that rows are like this, with a break in the middle so that you can quickly pass, so you don't have to go clear around rows to manage kids. And then be able to monitor the whole group while working with small groups. So if you have a small group area where kids move to work together, that when you're in this, you can still view your classroom and see what's going on. And then, of course, space between learners. And I know sometimes if we set kids at tables, which has gotten real popular, we have like 3 kids around a table, we tend to have more management problems. I'll tell you a quick story about that I worked with a teacher that wanted those round tables. So she had taught many, many years, and she thought she wanted these round tables. And she got them one year. She taught 7th grade social studies, and she had 3 students around each. And how I know this, I often had to go in there because some of my students were in there. Being in special ed, I had some kids in there, and what a terrible time. And come the end of that first year, she had more referrals than anybody else in the school. And I firmly believe it was because this arrangement, she didn't work right, that these 7th grade kids were not mature enough to sit around a table all day or every class period that they came into her. And of course, one of the things she would, like she taught up here, she can continually remind this person to turn around. Well, even if these were turned in, it was hard to see her and concentrate, so it caused some problems for her. So that was floor arrangements. And then some of these things, again, you may want to have some things on, like traffic patterns, doorways, personal storage, class materials, those things. And keep it clean and neat looking, and it'll make a nicer looking classroom for you. Now, traditionally it's in the front, and this is we've got some thoughts on this, that here's the classroom and here's the rows here of students, but there's some thoughts to go with this. Consider the back of the room. Say like here's the door. If this is the teaching space, say for this is where the board in the front of the room is, consider putting the desk in the back of the room, and here's why. I encourage you to stand and move around the classroom more. You'll be able to monitor the work better during work time if you're sitting in the back and looking at them facing forward. Perceived as the warmer teacher, It prevents of habits of teaching from the desk. Now, do you know that teacher that sat here in front and just sat there, that taught from there, hardly moved, um, would teach from there, give an assignment, never have to move around? We all knew that teacher, and that you don't want to be that kind of teacher. So here's one thing that you can have control in arranging your room is where that desk is. Now, what I found with my desk in the back, and that's what I did, is move my desk to the back of the room, is I had to be better organized. Otherwise, I spent a lot of trips going back and forth grabbing stuff. So I got better at managing a workspace up here where I had all my stuff I needed that day organized. Otherwise, I had to run to the back of the room and grab stuff off my desk. But teacher's desk can have an influence. Yeah, you might be looking. If you're in the front of the room, they can watch you and tell when you're looking. But when you're behind them, they don't know when you're looking. And so it's really hard for them to keep track of you. And it'll be much easier for you to monitor during seat work if you have your desk in the back. And then, of course, it's much easier to bring students back for whatever reason to the back of that room and have a conference with you if you're behind the students rather than, again, they can't watch. If you're in front, they can't. If they can watch you and monitor you a little bit, but in the back, if you're working with somebody else, it's harder for them to monitor you. Yeah, and you gotta have stuff, and this is what I see classrooms sometimes. All this stuff is sitting out all the time in the way, and so best if you have some kind of a system for that. And of course, this is one thing not always able to lock, but this is important here. And I see, we get in trouble with this as university professors. It's something that doesn't work, especially technology, but that the plug is good and the bulbs work and everything is in working order. And if it's not, get on it as quick as you can. Nothing more frustrating than needing something that's not working. Now, what about time? Okay. Here's something for you. Time will always be a factor. Write that down. That you'll struggle continuously in your teaching, feeling like you don't have enough time to get everything taught that you want to teach. And part of that is some of the off-task behaviors that'll happen. That'll be a time waster, what we call a time sucker. It'll take time from your teaching. And so you want to be very aware that there will be a limited amount of time to accomplish important educational goals. The research is very clear that the teachers that spend the most time in the classroom teaching get the most taught. And so the teachers that spend the most time managing and passing out passing out papers and handling stuff get less teaching. So the more time spent teaching, the higher the scores, achievement scores. So you have a limited amount of time. Effective, if not, wasted learners become bored, or if they're overwhelmed, frustrated because you're in inadequate time, that you're going too fast. Okay? So if you have to find that balance in there. Finds that the more time on task, the more learning that takes place. And let's have that be you, more time on task. Wouldn't that be great if that's what was said about you as a teacher, that you spend a lot of time on task teaching? Not so that they're bored, not so that they're wasting time, but you're on task. And those routine tasks are, how quick can I get things passed out and picked up? And of course, technology is changing this really fast because students are starting to have these computers and different things. But even to take the attendance and stuff, how quick can I do this and hold their attention so that they don't start visiting and horsing around while I'm doing what we call the chores? I have to do the chores of the day. I have to take the attendance. I have to make sure this is done and that is done. Sometimes you can have students do that, and now we have to log into our computer and punch in on the computer who is there, even if they're tardy. We have to do that, and it all goes up on the access point for the parents to see. Your job, but you do that in the routine of teaching. Then there's transitions. Can I transition from one thing to another? And it's not like from one thing to another, but one part to another. That if I need them to do something else, I got 50 minutes, maybe 90 minutes, depending if you have a block schedule or what. A block schedule is where you teach 2 periods back to back together, and you teach less classes in a day. Or middle school now usually have like a 40-minute period. Typical high school, 50-minute. But you don't know what it might be. But often, even in middle school, it's very, very hard to teach 40 minutes on the same thing, doing the same subject and stuff. So you'll have to transition. You'll have to transition from one thing to another. And how quick can you do that? Because you don't want to waste time. You don't want to lose attention. You plan, this is how I'm going to get from one thing to another. I'm going to put this down and pick this up. I'm going to redirect the students this way. Because once they lose their attention, what does lose their attention mean? Well, obviously they start to visit. They start to talk. They start to check with their neighbor. And then it always takes a couple taps of the pen to get them back. And so that's why you plan. How am I going to get from one place to the other in this lesson? And how are they going to be distributed and collected during transition, organized, all that in advance. Sometimes we have people that do that, have kids, they pick it up when they come in or they drop it off when they leave. All kinds of ways, but you plan. You plan how you're going to do each of those things. And class movement. How do they come in? How do they leave? How do we change spots? How do we move to other areas of the room? And we often train kids. This is how we're going to do it. And you demand that they follow those routines if your belief is that you don't want to waste time. Now, if you don't care, that doesn't matter. But if you are really concerned about that, that's how you do it. So how do we begin class? Well, they should begin promptly. Engage learners' attention, eliminate potential off-task behavior, maximize instructional time. They have a different name for it now, but when I was learning to teach, we called it an interest approach. That you start every lesson with an interest getter about your lesson. And sometimes it was a review, was what did we do, what did we learning, what did we talk about, those types of things. But you take off with a bang. We call it a snap, that when that bell rings, when that clock is straight up and it's your turn to teach, you start right exactly on time and you take off. And the slightest hesitation is what indicates to them that this isn't very important. And so if you've got, the first thing, maybe you've got some housekeeping things to do. This is what's coming. I need to make some announcements. Make sure you get this handed in. Who needs help with this? But nonetheless, when it hits the time, the top of the hour, whenever your class will start, you start. And really try to avoid some what I call, visiting time and some informal time. You can have that at the end, but if you're having informal things at the beginning, when students feel like they can visit, you'll have a hard time getting your class started every day after that. Okay, so you want to snap and take off right when that bell rings. It's time to teach. And you perform those routines quickly, and then you establish a signal system and form the class. Like you say to them, when I step to the front of the class, kids, we're going. Or when I hold my hand up, whatever your signal is says we're starting. And they need to come to attention right away, or you bite them. Whatever a consequence is, but you teach them that class, when I'm ready to start, you're ready to start. Whether you have some kind of an incentive system or points, especially middle school, I've seen this very effective, that we work towards point to have a popcorn party or something like that once a month. That I keep track of points, and every day we start on time, we get a point. And after we get if we can get 20 points, in a quarter or in a month, then we get to have this little incentive party, okay? And just little things like that I'm going to keep track of, and I guarantee they'll help keep each other a little more accountable for it. And you show them how you're going to pay attention, and it's called wait time. you have to wait and you have to teach them. If you have to wait too long, we have to take a point away. And that wait time is when I step to the class and say, can I have your attention? You get about a 2 count before it needs to be completely quiet in here. Okay, what does attention mean? What does that mean when when they pay attention? Here's the word attention. Well, here we say there's 4 things for attention. First of all, their eyes are on you, their hands are quiet, their feet are quiet, and their mouth is quiet. 4 things: eyes, hands, feet, mouth. And you wait till you have all those. And sometimes it kills you to wait that long, especially if the supervisor's there observing you. But you teach the students, I need to wait till I have your attention. Otherwise, this is what happens, especially to student teachers and young teachers. They start trying to talk over the top of the kids when they're not paying attention. Okay, that's number 1. And when they start to talk over kids while they're talking and not paying attention, and sometimes they're not talking, sometimes they're wiggling, they're fiddling around, you don't have their 100% attention. When that happens, you start to have to talk louder, wears you out. And number 2, you have to repeat and repeat. And if you start to repeat instructions and details, they'll quickly learn, oh, the teacher, if I don't hear it, the teacher will repeat it. So no sense really tuning into this because the teacher's going to repeat. And so you want to train your students real quick too. I'm not going to repeat things. And the way to avoid having to repeat is you ask for those 4 things and you wait for it. And you use your body language. And it signals the importance of the lesson. I just want to give you a little heads up now how to get attention in the class. And part of it's done with body language and facial expressions. But the big thing is the wait time. So if I step in my class, I've done my role, I've done my attendance, I step to the class and I say, good afternoon. And I wait. And I look around and my body language is saying, I'm ready to start class. And initially you have to bite them. But what I see student teachers afraid to do is wait. And we want to be friendly and we want to be happy, but the big thing initially is you're training them. You know the old thing about don't smile till Christmas? Well, it isn't about not smiling. It's about demanding perfection on these routines. And I think it's if you don't learn to get their attention and hold it, you'll struggle with that. And so, good afternoon. And maybe they say it back to you, and then you wait. And those 4 things: eyes on me, feet are quiet, hands are quiet, mouths are closed. And that means we're not looking for papers, we're not looking for pens, we're not turning on the computer. We stop and we freeze. And one of the things that we teach even young kids is that one of the ways that we quiet ourselves for listening is we quiet our heartbeat and our breath. Take smaller or take a big breath. And calm yourself. I have to calm myself. One of the places I have to do this is in church, or my mind is racing. And once I take that breath, so you may have to teach students, take a breath. If you truly want them to listen, you have to train them to quiet themselves. Then how do we know how fast to go? And I think this is one of the biggest challenges of student teachers and new teachers is how fast we go. Lesson pacing has lots of implications because if we're too fast, we're frustrated. If we're too slow, we're bored. Okay? So who do we teach to? We talked about this wide range of students that we have in our class. We talked about that bell-shaped curve, that half over here, half over here. How do we know how fast to go? How do we decide that? Well, kind of select a reference group is one way to do this. Include cross sections of learners. You know, that you have somebody that's high, you have somebody that's low, and somebody's in the middle. And by observing each of these, you can tell if they're with you or not based on their body language. Now, of course, sometimes it's hard to hold them together. You may have to do some modification for the lower end or even for the higher end, some kind of challenge activity. But on your regular activities, you want to monitor about a group of 3. I keep making eye contact here, in the middle, and on the bottom student to see how they're progressing, to know if I should move faster or slower. Okay, obviously this kid's a little bored because he's slower. This one's a little bored because he's faster. Frustrated and bored, so you monitor that. Now, if you're given like a lecture, you would speed up or slow down, but how about just simple instructions for a project? The same thing would happen. You would monitor those 3 spots to see what their body language is doing as you give instructions. And again, instructions especially is a time where you want to do it. You want to be detailed enough and complete enough and planned enough that you only have to say them once. What I often see teachers doing, especially student teachers, is they say, here are the 4 things that we have to do, but then as soon as they're done giving instructions, they add about 3 more things. And so you want to be planned well enough so that doesn't happen. Okay? All right. Oh, and we always have this. What do we do with those? Do you remember those kids in school? Or maybe you were one of those that always finished sooner. I never was. And so I couldn't understand. We're supposed to do from 1 to 10. And before I got to number 2, somebody was done and handing it in. And man, I couldn't figure out how they could do that. So what do you do with those? What do you do with those that are done quickly? And of course, those that you say you have 15 minutes to do this. These are done, and then you've got some that never finish it. What do we do with those that can't ever quite get finished, or those 10 problems in the 15 minutes that you allow that they should have easily got done? Did they waste time? Are they slow? Is it too hard? Did they not understand? And that's the other thing you do as a teacher in lesson pacing is investigate, why isn't this getting done? Because as you know, this is the death of students, and failure is those kinds of things, is not getting those day-to-day things done. And it comes with lesson pacing. It has to be another productive activity if we're going to challenge people, and it can't be more of the same. What could be a challenge? It can't be you get to play on the computer, because I'm going to race through this and my slow kids never are going to get to play on the computer because they're done quick. What could be interesting and motivational and challenging, yet not more of the same? That's one of your challenges as a teacher in lesson pacing. Serving like 25 to 30 students, it may be frustrating to answer all the questions. And so here, the Fred Jones model says this. Here's what you do to do these, shorten this time. First, you find they have something. You step to their desk, you find something they've done correct, and you praise them for it. This is right. Or you've got your name. If nothing else, you got your name. You got paper out. I mean, I say, boy, I'm glad to see you. At least you got paper out. You're ready to do something. But you find something to do right, and then you provide the direct instructions what should be done next. And then you move quickly to the next students, and you check back. Never more than 20 seconds at a learner's desk. What happens? You want to avoid dependency on this. If you're there longer than 20 seconds, again, they're going to figure out, the teacher, you, will come and reteach the lesson. And what you want to do is just give some basic direct instruction, no more than 20 seconds, and move on. Okay. I want to just touch one more on this here. One of the things on this also is, what if you have 25 to 30 students in your class and you get done and you give your 4-step instruction, 1, 2, 3, 4, and now of the 25 you have 20 hands up. Well, what should we do if there's 20 hands up? Do you have time to go around even at 20 seconds and address 20 questions? Well, first thing is if there's 20 hands up, you obviously have not got the lesson across the way it needed to be taught. Either the instructions for the seat work or the lesson itself or the concept, you need to be made to open up the class again and get back to teaching or reteach part of it. Do not go around and respond to 20 hands up. And I see student teachers do this. Give what I call incomplete instructions for an assignment or seat work. And then when nobody knows what to do, I'm going to go from desk to desk and reteach this. And that is not the way to do it, because it'll train them to have dependency. That from now on, if there's something I'm not even listening real well, I know that teacher, if I just raise my hand and say I don't understand, they'll come to my desk and reteach it. And it'll create a dependency issue. Okay. How about routines and procedures? These reoccurring predictable events. And this is what I was saying before, that if you don't have routines, how you're going to start the class, routines, how you're going to pick up things, it'll drain you and you'll get fatigued and you'll make mistakes. And one thing you do, you get more emotional and you'll tend to, what I call, escalate. You'll get louder. And so that's why you plan this. Now it seems redundant, and the thing is, you'll go and student teach with somebody that kind of has this embedded in their system already. And sometimes I'll have a hard time following exactly how they do it, but you need to plan, how am I going to start the class each day? I'm going to teach 5 classes a day. How am I going to start that class period? And I had the pleasure of teaching in a middle school in Sioux Falls where we taught our regular teachers taught 5 sections of each thing each day. And I got the pleasure of watching some of them that did the exact same thing. They started each class the same, and the students knew exactly what to expect. I'll give you a hint. One was a math teacher, and here was her routine. Each day when they came in, there was a math problem on the board. They knew this. They were to do that one problem on the board. No talking or anything. That was their thing. And then how she started class, when she would take attendance while they're still doing this problem, she would pick one of them at random to come up and do that problem on the board. And either right or wrong, no matter how he did it, she dealt with that problem, and immediately, she didn't have to tell them, they started going over their assignment from the day before. When the assignment was corrected, when they corrected their own most of the time, then she taught the next lesson. When the lesson was taught, she assigned the seat work. She walked around and recorded the grades from the seat work the day before and gave assistance to anybody that wanted. She was a master at picking out students that were having a problem by watching their body language. And of course, it was the same kids each day. The kids that just had more difficulty with math, that she knew enough to monitor them quickly to see if they had gotten the lesson for that day. But she had a very solid routine established each day how she did things. Okay. What do we do when we enter the room? Can we sit down and start the visit? Can we talk? Can we come to your desk? What do we do? Can we leave the room once we walk in? Okay, all kids, but I think middle school especially, they constantly had problems that they needed to discuss with somebody. What do I do with that? Am I going to deal with this before class starts? I'm saying passing out and collecting things. How am I going to get stuff passed out? Do they pick it up when they come in? Do they drop it off when they leave? How do I do this? Do I have one person in the back that passes for me, passes stuff out and picks it up for me? What is the thing? Where do we sharpen pencils? And here's one I would say. This was my thing about pencils, or like if I had to go to the bathroom, something to discuss. When I'm teaching, when I'm lecturing, or what I call it when I'm explaining, nobody moves. But when I assign the seat work, then if you need to sharpen, or if you need to go to the bathroom, or you need to discuss something with me, or you need to go to the office, that's when you go. But during my instructional time, nobody gets up. You don't sharpen, you don't leave, because it's so important, these few minutes. And I'm not going to teach for 40 minutes. I'm not going to teach for 50 or 90 minutes. I'm going to teach probably 15 at the most, maybe 20. And then it'll be seat work, or then it'll be some interaction time or something like that. But when I'm teaching, please don't be doing those things. And how am I going to do a daily attendance, and how am I going to take care of that? and leave the room. And often the office calls them down or something like that. What's that procedure? But you establish this. Now, when you go to student teach, you often have to follow what they do. But when you get your own classroom, think through these things. Hang on to these notes so you can review some of these things when you get your first contract. Okay, you know what? Learn or misbehavior, that's going to be the next lesson. Okay.